Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Mirror's Edge Catalyst. So, we have this Beatrix character for the side mission exit strategy. We've never even seen her before. I assume she potentially wants us to help her escape Glass City, or she's gonna make some really good offer um, to Faith so that she might be able to escape Glass City after we finish the main story. But I want to take a moment um, and say two things. One, after the last recording, I just did not feel like playing this game anymore. We're almost done, so that's not a good sign that I am running out of steam. But two, I'd like to compare this game to a little game called Lego Marvel Superheroes, which has not a one-to-one recreation of Manhattan Island, the what most people would call New York City, but really just Manhattan. In Lego form, there are noticeable buildings that you can recognize. You do, in modern times, have a question certainly is about whether or not you want to depict the Twin Towers in a 3D environment to represent Manhattan, and most people probably wouldn't nowadays unless it was set in the past. Uh, but what I want to mention there is that there has been there was a lot of work to go from something like Lego Batman 2 that had a very small Gotham City that was fictional to go to Lego Marvel Superheroes and have the representation of Manhattan in a slightly scaled down form. Not every single block from like First Street all the way up to like 184th Street or however high the numbers go in Manhattan is represented. They merge boring parts down so it's more reasonable to wander around. But that city recreation becomes something that you can reuse. And for EA, if they really were going to try and make games, that city recreation would have been so much more useful than making a fictional city like Glass City. Like, none of these buildings really look like any actual existing buildings, other than the fact that a lot of them are square. So, like, you couldn't copy and paste this into another environment. Uh, Unlike Ubisoft and like the Assassin's Creed series, which tried to be fairly historically accurate in all of the ancient cities it was trying to represent, or at least something like this, or GTA, which again doesn't have a one-to-one recreation of LA in some of its games, but it has something that could be used again. All the effort to make this city, and this is the point I'm trying to make, probably poorly, only helps you in making a Mirror's Edge 3 or Mirror's Edge Catalyst 2. Like, none of these buildings in their current form can be copied and pasted into a different city. You could take individual buildings, although it's questionable how much of the buildings really have been built, because really these are mostly hollow buildings with a few floors, if you enter them, that you can access. Uh, but even that would be good enough. So you know that they desperately wanted in Mirror's Edge Catalyst to get away from it being China. Like, it was fairly obvious that it was a China. Um, in Mirror's Edge, you had an Asian-looking character. Most of the other characters looked Asian, even in the Western version. Very often there are Eastern versions of face models that make a lot more characters look Eastern Asian, and then the Western versions just effectively replace the textures with more Western characters. But even in the Western version of Mirror's Edge, it was fairly obvious that it was China, um, and they wanted to get away from that. But that doesn't stop you from saying, okay, this is Manhattan. The Glass City got destroyed and it got remade as Manhattan, and that a lot of buildings still exist. and that a lot of censorship happened. It would be a very interesting story, frankly, if it turned out that this was Manhattan, and I guess that's about the best way you can see the city, but then you have this draw distance fog that makes that kind of useless too. Uh, but yeah, if the conglomerate was not only trying to get rid of Omnistat as a government that replaced Manhattan, but before then there were even hints of a United States. Like if you got really deep down here, underground, and you started finding pictures of like Abraham Lincoln or something, just like uh, one indication that this is even connected to a real world, then you could certainly make an island that was like Manhattan. Now, arguably, I will say Manhattan as an island is not the best island ever. Uh, it is a long strip where you might want more of a circular design, but you could kind of work around that too. Anyways, that's kind of a long rant, but it does highlight something that is a theme that I've noticed in this game, is that there's been a lot of effort to put in grid links, a lot of effort to put in collectibles, a lot of effort uh, to put in races, and it's all wasted production effort, frankly, because I don't want to play any of that content. There's too much of it. It's overwhelming. It's out of the beaten path, and the main game is just not that good. When you compare the races in this game to the time trial modes that just had you run through the very nicely polished sections of the original Mirror's Edge, it's night and day difference. Because every chapter in the original Mirror's Edge, they put a lot of effort to make it be a really good experience. To then post game say, why don't you run through this chapter again and we'll give you a time trial score, is just encouraging you to play the good content again. In this, every random beat, chase, or delivery mission is its own separate thing, and it has the possibility of being good, but it more than likely is just going to average out to being in the middle. And most players will never play it the first time, let alone a second time, which these races have different star settings, so they kind of do want you to run them at least perfectly the first time or multiple times until it is perfectly. Anyways, let's continue. You meet Beatrix Block briefly, shortly. You met Beatrix Block shortly before your capture 2 years ago, and the two of you had a short but honest conversation. She might be high caste, but there's something you can relate to in her. Now she needs your help with something, whatever a woman like her might need help with is beyond you. So this is supposed to be your friend from before the beginning of the game, 2 years before the beginning of the game. Um, that's interesting. It almost feels like she's going to turn into a runner that played a big role in the original game, since this game still has that odd feel like it is a almost alternate universe, almost prequel to the first game. Um, and they just squeezed this final submission, side mission at the end because it doesn't really connect to the rest of the story.
I honestly never expected to see you again.
It's been a while, hasn't it, Faith? Ours was one of the few honest conversations I've ever had. What happened to you?
I screwed up. They put me away, and now I'm out.
Again, I have to control the camera.
A great many cocktail parties. Kruger hates you and your kind.
The feeling's mutual. What can I help you with, Beatrix?
Well, since we last met, I've gotten married. A corporate union. His name is Peter Bryson.
And you had no say in this?
It was a board decision. An attempt to further unify Bryson Industries and Cascadia Logistics.
But that's crazy.
Well, it's my reality. and I would be okay with it, duty and all. But
You're scared.
Peter likes to argue with his fists.
Want me to break his wrists?
Tempting, but no. I want to divorce him, and I think I know a way. Rumor has it that he's sleeping with Aurora LePan Tanner. An affair like that would be cause enough.
But you need proof.
Yes. If you could plant these bugs at the locations I'll send you, I'm sure I could get enough for the board to annul the marriage.
I'll do it. Send me the locations.
I will. Thanks, Faith. I'll owe you one. A big one.
So, yeah, I guess she's not the character I'm thinking of in the original game. But this is a mistake. This is the exact kind of information you would have wanted at the beginning of the game before we got into the whole reflection storyline and all of that. Like, if all of a sudden, at nearly the end of the game, I'm being told that the boards not only control every aspect of their lives, but control marriage, that's a big difference. That's important information that we should have known this whole time, that the high caste is still under control of the boards and the corporations, and they're straight up doing arranged marriages. A more modern version of this game almost certainly would have had her want to like marry a woman.
Watch out for Kruger-sec patrols. Most places around here are pretty heavily guarded due to the bombings lately.
Faith can easily beat up at least 10 Kruger-sec, maybe even 20. Kuma says she's the best fighter she knows.
Wait, who's
Interesting that Plastic.
I'm Plastic, and you're Beatrix Block, heiress to Cascadian Logistics, married to Peter Bryson.
Not for much longer, I hope.
Alright. Now we don't have to do this quietly, thank goodness. But I think we still probably want to move fast. That was a different combination of enemies, so that feels like that is more programmed.
The restaurant has an outside terrace where Peter usually sits. Place the bug there.
Just knock these guys over. Can we place this? Nope, we've got to eliminate the security presence. Which means I can't even start to take these guys out until... Yeah, make 2 or 3 missions. Oh, you have to be on the same level, I guess, to destroy the security cameras too. If they had made 2 or 3 of these missions like this, where you figured out more about where the high caste belongs and low caste and mid caste, and how they just belongs is the wrong phrase.
Hideaway apartment. I know chicks are there all the time.
What is this all about?
Who are you again?
I told you already. I'm Plastic. Faith is my friend.
See if
Plastic, my husband is an abusive, ego-tripping cheat, and I want to divorce him.
So why don't you?
Faith is helping me by planting these bugs.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, Beatrix could be a runner in the other game, and you just wouldn't know because in all the runners give these fake names assigned to them. Like, Faith's name is real, but Plastic's name is not real, and Icarus's name is not real. And that seems like while that was some cool ideas, I suppose, or somewhat of a cool idea, maybe a little even childish of an idea,
There's a balcony
originally,
right outside the bedroom. Plant the bug there. You want to listen to him sleeping? Not exactly plastic. His mistress will be there too. Oh, shut up, Kuma.
So I guess maybe we were supposed to see more of KrugerSec on computer screens. So Kuma is keeping Plastic unaware of sex, I guess, and that doesn't quite make a lot of sense because Plastic still does not really come off as being that young. She does come off as being kind of autistic, but it's not realistic that autistic people would not be told anything about sex or wouldn't know.
Where can
Unless they wanted to
His
create...
I've sent you the location. Thank you so much for doing this.
Unless they wanted to create a different type of society completely. Yep, I was facing downward there. Where sex is just never mentioned, or it was very, very taboo. Even more taboo than it is in most societies. That it still doesn't really make sense. Yeah, what they would have needed to do, and it wouldn't have been terrible to write this, is to say that the corporations are intentionally making sex a thing that only the high caste people are allowed to engage in without otherwise permission, but then you'd only have high caste people in one generation, and so that wouldn't make sense. You could say the corporations are intentionally trying to reduce the population. There's enough technology and automation here really to mostly get rid of the idea of low caste and mid caste people, because you don't need workers if most things are automated. And even Reflection certainly plays into that mentality. It feels like they are working towards a point where they could just kill all the mid caste and low caste people with Reflection. But that still doesn't seem like they could just...
Has some advanced security systems in place.
But even if they were trying to
Salesman said so.
censor the world
Isn't. Expect some company when you're there, Faith.
and get rid of the knowledge of sex, Plastic working with the runners and criminals would be like day one, hey, there's this thing called sex. It's great. What? What? Who spotted me there? This is a problem I think that they run into a lot of times in
That's it.
sci-fi stories.
All done.
I got 2 more achievements there.
The alert has been triggered. You should get away from there.
Now I have like two
You get what you need,
people
Matrix.
chasing after me.
I'm sure I will. Thanks again, Faith.
Interesting, I've never been here before. Of course, we're still technically being counted as being in the line of sight. This really just feels like this is an exit only. Or you can just die from a stupid jump and then it'll just reset anyways. Interesting. Yeah. If you consider like an anime like Cowboy Bebop. They had this girl, although I think it was a girl named Ed in Cowboy Bebop that was the cool young super hacker that was probably too young for like for their own good and for the anime that it was in. Here they've made plastic physically look older, which is probably a smart move, but then they still have her mentally acting like she would be
We lost some good people in that raid.
like a 10-year-old or younger even. And that's not realistic. You can't be a naive savant that and be into programming, because inherently in the idea of programming is the idea of learning new things. And while you may be somewhat only obsessed with computers and such, you're not going to be that naive. Like they're taking it to cartoony levels with plastic, which may not really matter too much because she's not that important of a character, as nobody is that important of a character. Let's see if we can get this kit, and then let's fast travel and just finish the game. This is an odd safe haven. I guess you can just fall this way. And you can see that was the falling to your death animation that started loading there. But it canceled out because you were about to fall onto a onto the landing pads. They don't do much with the landing pads. Yeah, I just don't see a way you could get up to this point. So, Elysium did something to Kat, but we don't know if that something was to actually try and treat her damaged lungs, which whatever they gassed her with must have been way more strong than it should have been for chemical warfare, although she was a kid at that time too, so like, should any chemical warfare actually happen? No. But it doesn't feel like they were pulling their punches when they were gassing the people. Right. Yeah. There's got to be some kind of secret area to get lower.
We could use some distraction.
We've been here. This is where we started. I think this really highlights a problem, certainly, is that we know there's a collectible. We know it's in this building. We don't know how to get to that point. Unless it is just going up to go down, which it might be. You would think that a lot of these windowed ceilings would lead towards like secret locations or something. And clearly they just did not want you to be able to get to the backside of this building. They didn't put anything there. So this would put us back here. Or we can just jump down here and save ourselves some time. And literally the game is just getting bored with you at this point. So it's throwing the random spawning of enemies. And we did get a nice look in there to see that it is just monster closets. It's 100% empty rooms that can come out of these Kruger-Sec buildings. If I roll here, nope, that I'll still die. This really is just a taste of what the game would be like if I constantly tried to go and collect everything. It really would be just interesting. I can't even get this to let me run up the wall, because that's what I was kind of hoping that you could do. Like in here we see it. And over here there seems to be nothing. So how does one get in here? I can look down and see the ground. I can see a Kruger-Sec door here that won't open. They put a pole right in the way. I can't really look up. None of these have an interact button or prompt like that. Where'd the pipe go? There. It would make some sense if the doors straight up, and you could never like get down towards a ledge where it really feels like there should be something to let you do that. It would make sense if some doors could unlock and it just didn't tell you that. Yeah. Yeah, it seems like there's probably some weird twisty path to get in there that is very, very far away, or possibly is even related to a like submission or something that you just cannot do while regularly playing. There is a slight danger, certainly, around the idea of areas being potentially open only when you're doing a dash. And that creating a weird scenario where you would have to do dashes to find collectibles. Is there a way to get higher? There is, but it's way out here on this side. Alright. Okay, it's just up here. Which is funny because we were here, or in a place like this before. And this is a yellow elite kit. Complete all the side missions, it gets a runner tag frame, runner tag background, and triangles blue. Which I think none of that is actually usable in game. I think yeah. This is the only thing that you can customize in game. Everything else would require you to go to the EA Origin website to change your appearance. And that's not worth it. Okay. So, as far as basic kits and kits, you really don't need to pick them up now, because if you were going to try and get them all, you would first want to actually play game content and do all the races, and all the deliveries and all the hackable billboards and everything. And I doubt I'm going to want to do any of that either. I heavily suspect that at this level, they won't even give you a peaceful environment. Maybe there will be an option when you load into the game after you've beaten the main story to have the Kruger sec not bother you, or at least go into a low alert mode. But since we found out or figured out that this whole time I could have been using the disruptor to break security cameras, I suspect the burden is going to be on you to simply break all the security cameras in an area. It's also weird that this presenter lady doesn't seem to be much of a character. It would have just made more sense then to replace her with Kruger himself and then have him be his own spokesman in the game. Yeah, runner tag frame. Runner tag frames. Runner tag emblems. Just make sure there aren't any more. They collect, yeah. Alright. Subvert the glass public transit system to get to the spire to end the game. Now the spire has been bombed by Black November, so this might be an attempt at a pretty cool sequence if we get to the spire and the building's on fire. Pardon the alliteration there. But yeah, if there was this fire mechanic that you had to race through, and then if you didn't move fast enough you'll die, that could be very frustrating too, but that would be something different and interesting as far as an action sequence. The problem with that though is if there was a really cool fire animation and coming up from the ground, working up floor by floor sequence, you would definitely expect that sequence to or fire to have played a different role at some point. And it just doesn't seem like, and it hasn't. We haven't seen any kind of fire at all. We may see maybe some of the building collapse bit by bit. That would make more sense as if we started having a swing on pipes and then the pipes broke after we swung on them. I'm not sure I have spent much of any time in this area. I mean, that definitely felt like a really easy let's see. Let's do the security hub because almost certainly it's going to get in our way anyways. Yeah, you definitely are running into that same problem that where even though this is an open world, if you're most players, or at least players who are playing like I am, are going to focus heavily on doing the main story. And if you focus heavily doing on the main story, you're not going to take these side missions that take you somewhere else. They always say it's the same number, I'm fairly certain. I think it's always 5962. And there might be some hint into that number. Nope, I guess that it's proving me wrong. They must have had to record multiple lines of dialogue. They're saying that runner instead of Faith, which storyline wise it would make sense that they wouldn't just all immediately recognize her by name or refer to her as by name. This is the last of the security hubs, which really there should be a different, like, there should be a whole different ending to the game because I did this. Of course, runner's vision is not programmed well enough to just point you in a direction and run. Can't go that way. Once again, they've decided the sphere of influence is about as big as the area you can travel, so barely going to be far enough away here that let's just stay out of sight now. There really should have been a lot more of this, just short hallways that connect to nothing, that have maybe gated off areas. In the original game there were just like gates that were closed where normal people would have been able to access at different times, but they were closed for you. Alright, well. So, unless I'm confused here, we've done all the grid nodes, we've done all the security hubs, we've done nowhere close to the opportunity missions. I'm not even sure how I've gotten up to 8 as far as the 40 opportunity missions. We could easily get all the grid leaks. But documents, secret bags, electronic parts, all would be fairly large asks. And it would be kind of odd, certainly, if the game came back and said, you've beaten the main story, now you can run further, you won't stumble, you automatically roll, you can jump higher. If it just like kind of broke the physics and made everything a lot easier post post the story mode, that would be weird, certainly, because making a game easy after you've beaten it doesn't help too many players compared to making a game easy in the middle of people playing it or because people are struggling to beat the game. And I've died a lot of times and never felt for 1 second they were willing to make the game easier. Sometimes they'll randomly spawn fewer Kruger-sec people, but that's about all they're willing to do. The reflection virus will soon be ready, but to upload it, you need to go to Sky City, where the main reflection hub is located at the top of the damaged shard. In order to get there, you need a ride. Plastic has sent you to subvert a transit control hub, which will allow her to send a train to Sky City through the evacuation blockade, hopefully with you on it.
Good, you're there. Connect to the console I've marked for you, and I'll tunnel in.
Alright.
Once I start spreading the hubs, you'll have to be fast getting to each one. Just so you know.
They called it a train, but is it really an underground train, or is it a tram going through the air? Alright. Interesting. Oh, I have to pull it down. Okay. I see what I'm doing now. I'm doing a wall run, 180. Wall run, 180. Yep, and then fall to your death because I needed to actually pull down another platform first. They're heavily leaning on the wall run 180 jumps as a way of getting up. Which
Connect to the console I've marked for you, and I'll tunnel in.
I feel like the
Once I
game
start spreading the hubs, you'll have to be fast getting to each one. Just so you know.
needed to give you a new move. I barely made that. Yep, stand in the right place to pull that down first. And if they're going to give you a rope that pulls you up, it probably... Wow. These angles are very awkward, and it doesn't feel like the game is locking you into any specific angles to help you at all. Yeah, if you had like an ability on your gauntlet that let you magnetically lift you upwards or climb a little higher.
You'll have to be fast getting to each one. Just so you know.
Like, this definitely feels like they're putting this here specifically because they didn't want a lot of players to see this section. This is pretty crazy. And there's an easy fix to this section also. All they would have needed to do is put a fence on the sections that are higher here. Have an opening here that was a little bit more specific, just like have a gate that or a doorway that's open there, and then a fence around it, and then if you miss your jump you would just fall back down and you wouldn't be subjected to these incredibly long load sections. Even if this
Once I start spreading the hubs, you'll have to be fast getting to each one. Just so you know.
Yeah. Even if this load section was in its own small separate area, that would be helpful instead of being in the open world. Alright. Man, I am just butterfingering this, and I'm doing this legitimately. I'm not trying to make a point here or intentionally falling off. These platforms are slick. Arguably, maybe an upgrade that makes your feet stick to the ground would be potentially helpful too, instead of rolling. Like, that works. There's no other way you're going to get that height, though. Now, I also have a concern. I'm going to jump up here, grab this, and then I don't know where I'm supposed to go, and B, I'm gonna like finish this and yet not get a checkpoint, and then have to go find a different hub tower like this, because this almost feels like there's going to be several of these throughout the city that you could have done maybe even earlier. Hopefully this checkpoints
Okay.
you.
Connecting you.
Here we go. Go to the next one. Hurry!
I'm gone.
This may be a point where the game is legitimately going to give you a timer, whereas no other part of the game has legitimately required a timer. That's an odd line of dialogue. And if you press B as you're running, you're safe to disrupt those fans, but the game didn't really tell you that. And all I'm doing right now is just kind of running, which this makes this the oddest like sequence so far in the entire game, because it is basically
Damn it. Krugersek have noticed something's up. They sent a patrol to the second hub.
is that because I opted to short circuit a yeah, I don't know if that was because I just opted to short circuit the camera, or if that is because I did something normal. Right. That one just moved up. Alright. I nearly fell to my death there. Interesting. It seems to me like they can't lift when there's weight on them. This may be close to impossible. And how many of these do we have to do? I would suspect 3. And so the third one may be even worse. Yep. They just straight up are going to reset you.
The complexity of what I'm doing.
And that's a pretty terrible line of dialogue to end up potentially hearing multiple times. A game like this would definitely benefit from multiple save states also. If, for instance, you could, say, go back 5 seconds versus 10 seconds versus 30 seconds in a run. That would be very beneficial. And maybe that would mean you would have to sometimes rewind back even further to gain a few extra seconds, but it would let the player decide that and learn how to use a system like that. So here's a question. Nope, camera is...
Damn it. Krugersek have noticed something's up. They sent a patrol to the second hub.
Where's the other guy? Alright. First one is just a run up the wall and a 150, 180. And then from there you can get to that point. And from there you can get to that point. And from there I guess you can get to that point. And maybe you can get to that point. Alright. Another checkpoint with a minute and 30 seconds left.
I just got us some more time. We'll move on to the last one.
Got it.
So is this going to leave us with that 130 or are we... Yep, it leaves us with that 130. So if we just checkpointed ourselves with just barely enough time, we're screwed. And we would have to probably abandon the mission, and how easy even that is to do is questionable. It did seem to give me a little bit more time now, but not that much. And the good news is that they've given us an opportunity here. Pull that down. And so I guess we're supposed to maybe just listen to the audio.
2 seconds left. Move.
Come on. Pull that down. Alright. There's a real opportunity here to screw up and die. Yeah. I guess we'll try to get back to where we are, but with 18 seconds it seems more likely that's not going to happen. You might as well look for collectibles. Now, the retry here. Hopefully that sets us back on the second point and doesn't set us back all the way to the beginning. Yep. It sets us back, and now we have 2 minutes, whereas we had felt like closer to a minute 40, minute 50. A little bit more times. Not a bad thing, of course, but it's also not going to really help you much. If the problem is the Butterfingers problem, which it is for me, and it's just a matter of I don't have the skill to do this kind of jumps. It also certainly opens up a question that I think needs to be asked as far as where does the rest of this final part of the game take us? Are we going to be doing more parkour, or are we just going to a boss fight of some sort? Oh well, I made it up here. I will take that victory then. With 40 seconds left.
Full access. Train's fun. Now you should have
Trains.
no trouble getting to the shard.
Plastic, is there anything you can't do?
Of course.
It might be trains.
And after all this, I will need to stay off the grid for a while. Everything I do leaves a trace, and sooner or later the grid watch will catch on, even if they are stupid.
Okay.
I knew it. They're trying to ambush you. Get away from their faith.
Now, there was a security chip I could have grabbed, but now is not the time. Let's just keep running, I guess. This is a area where we ran through at the very beginning of the game, so they're trying to make a parallel here to show, oh, you're so much of a better runner now, and this chase sequence is so beneath you that you can do it blindfolded. But the problem, of course, would be that I'm not that much better of a runner now. And
They lost you, Faith.
apparently I got an achievement for that big chase.
But I never doubted you.
That's 242 XP extra. Now we have the map update of the Shard mission, which is oddly over here. But I could just fast travel over there and save myself some frustration. Even if that is going to potentially cause us to not get chased by Krugersek in some kind of scripted event, I kind of don't care. So, yeah. My interest in this game is quickly diminishing. Yep. I like how this character very smoothly spins around and stares at you when you get near. I don't like how her wrists are animated awkwardly and such, but so often I've seen in video games where you start to try and talk to somebody or get near them, and then they just twist their neck in a very awkward manner. Like, this is actually really nice animation for most players who will never even see that or look. Again, I just have to point out, like, Plastic, she looks like at minimum she's 16 years old. Like, minimum. In reality, she could be as old, well, in the future she could be 60 years old and you just wouldn't know. But they keep writing her as this autistic child with her stuffed doll in the form of a robot that she's still talking to. He's still alive, but does not look particularly good. There might be some purple bruising or swelling happening around his neck. It's kind of hard to see. This lighting is blocking me from getting in this area. Yep. I guess that's because the roof is slanted too. Yeah. You probably would have wanted to introduce Plastic as a stepdaughter of Noah's. Someone who was in the same room with Noah all the time. Someone that he was always taking care of and helping, instead of having her in her own location. This safe house could have been just a regular safe house with nobody important in it. Like, her goals are pretty much 100% in line with Noah's goals. So if they had depicted them as more of a tight-knit family type unit in the lair, that probably would have been great. We are back to still having basic kits in the lair. We had just collected some. So it does feel like these customizations still are in huge numbers available to collect. And there's just really a ton of I guess anything that says opportunity at the end is an opportunity mission. It's just a ton of gameplay in this game that I'm probably not going to play. I really wish this game had done something to make me fall in love with the environment. Because if you loved the landmass, if you loved the city, you then would have that extra excuse to continue to play. But really don't love the landmass or the city. Skyrim, in comparison, is mostly just flat land. There's one big mountain of importance, certainly in Skyrim, but for the most part it is one big flat land with a few cities and lots of caves and dungeons. But there's a level of familiarity with it that makes it very playable to wander around the land of Skyrim without it being a big deal or an annoyance. You run into the problem of being on the rooftops and falling to your death a lot more in this kind of game than any other, and that leads to a contempt, certainly, for this city. Like, I'm not particularly happy with it because of its ease of falling to your death aspects. But I'm also not really happy with it because, unlike a flat piece of land, if you just took a flatten tool, like you took a big hammer and smashed this whole city down flatly, there still would be a lot of places that were just one path, one hallway to get from point A to point B, and that connects to another hallway that gets from point A to point B, that connects to another hallway. Like, you can look here at this section. There, from this building, you can go to this building if you're going in this direction, and that's it. From this building, you could go to this building to get to this building, or you can go further along this building to get to this building to get to this building. You probably can't get to this building, and if you do get to this building, it's probably to do a mission in this big tall building. You probably can't jump from this building to this building or this building, so there's just kind of a stop there. When you get to this building, you could go over to this building or this building, and maybe you can go from this building to this building, but maybe not. Then, or you could go this way to this building, which then lets you go here and here. It's just two narrow paths. You can clearly see the bridges there. Only way to get to this section is through this one bridge, and then you have to go from this building to this one bridge. Whereas if this was just all flattened and I wanted to go, say, from this building to this building, you would just be able to walk there, and you can't do that. Yep, that's kind of the height of the annoyance. Interestingly, we may get most of the surveillance recordings for the missions, and probably not all the documents, and definitely not all the secret bags. Seems like Cascadia Logistics got us some more documents about that side corporation. Like, they have clearly a name for all of these conglomerates. Like, it may be from this point down to the point below Raposa. All of those might be different corporations. And it would have made so much more sense to have at least one quest where you investigate each corporation and learn about it early in the game. You break into their facility, or do something to learn about them. Like, learning about the corporations would be an early first step, certainly, to learn about what the conglomerate itself is all about, and then work our way to like Development Zone G and the Omnistat tunnels and the Omnistat years, and then the Kruger uprising. Yeah, all of those kind of historical elements and world building would be very useful. Still does not feel like we're going to have a high chance of getting all the recordings for what they're worth. A lot of this kind of content has become incredibly standardized in the sense that it's just something that publishers and game developers feel like they have to have in their game, when Mirror's Edge is kind of an example of a great game that worked by being short and being more focused on the story it wanted to tell and having the gameplay elements they wanted to have. And that's with the huge caveat that Mirror's Edge 1 probably still shouldn't have had guns in it. But in comparison to Catalyst, that doesn't have guns and then makes you regret not having a gun, it was probably the better decision for the time. But yeah, I think there was somewhere around 15 secret bags as collectibles throughout the entirety of Mirror's Edge 1. And that was it. To branch it out to over 400 really is just distracting from the main game and the real story. Of course, you can always go the opposite direction and end up making a game like the Telltale games, where it's just all cutscenes and dialogues, and it's basically just a visual novel in a new form factor. Even that, though, probably would have worked well. Like, there would have been a kind of smart play to say, a year after Mirror's Edge came out, the original Mirror's Edge, or maybe 2 years, to say, hey, we're going to just take all of our cutscenes and some gameplay footage from a pro speedrunner, and we're going to merge these together, and then we're going to put some different dialogue choices into it, and we're going to make an experience for people who have problems with their fingers or just aren't too into the parkouring gameplay mechanic. We're going to let you experience that story. And the original Mirror's Edge story, it wasn't even that good, but yeah, if you had taken that and made a Telltale style game around it, that would have been somewhat interesting, certainly. Maybe you don't have Faith as the main character in that spin-off game, but you can certainly do something interesting with it. Borderlands did Tales from the Borderlands, and I felt like that worked fairly greatly, considering it was a game universe surrounded by RPG first-person shooting, and they take out the whole RPG elements, really, and the first-person shooting elements, and just tell a story. Anyways, with any luck, we'll be done with the next recording. That's going to be it for this one. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.